Thank you very much. It's a privilege to have Ambassador Haran with us today. Ambassador Haran has had a long and distinguished career in the Foreign Service. He served in our missions in Moscow, Kabul, Colombo, and Brussels. He has been our permanent representative to the World Trade Organization. He's been our deputy chief of mission in Kathmandu. He was our ambassador to Syria from January 2009 to December 2012. And then he was our ambassador to Bhutan from January 2013 to 2014. Since his retirement, he's been actively involved in various research projects and discussing things related to international affairs. Ambassador Haran, your stay in Syria from 2009 to 2012 must have been very eventful. What would you describe as the 2 or 3 or 4 standout events of your stay?
Thank you, Sanjay. First of all, let me thank MEI for inviting me for this interaction. I would also like to thank all those who have tuned in or logged in for this event. Now, yes, there are a couple of, or rather 3 or 4 important events which I would like to recall. One is the visit of the President of India, Pratibha Singh Patil. This was in November 2010. This was, of course, sort of a return visit to the visit by President Assad to India in June 2008. We had also the Joint Commission meeting that was in June 2010, for which our Commerce and Industry Minister, Mr. Anand Sharma, had come. There were a whole lot of economic and commercial projects that were being considered, and some of them had taken off, etc. And the third important event that happened, of course, that attracted attention all over the world was the Syrian unrest. In fact, today, the unrest completes 10 years because it started on the 18th of March in 2011. So today it completes 10 years. I mean, today marks the completion of 10 years of unrest. After the unrest commenced, of course, everything became topsy-turvy, and one had to reorient oneself to focus on issues that needed to be attended to during the unrest, with the result that everything else fell off the radar screen.
Obviously, the situation changed completely midway during your stay. So I would suggest that we first look at the first period of your stay till March 18th, 2011, and we concentrate on that. And just an administrative announcement that those wishing to put any questions may kindly put their questions into the chat box. So, as you said that there was a presidential visit to Syria early on in your term, and there was a meeting of the Joint Commission. Obviously, presidential visits have their implications. What did you say the political implications of the visit were?
Syria and India have had regular exchange of visits at the highest level, all through, right from the time Syria became independent and we became independent. It has been carrying on since then. As I mentioned earlier, President Assad had come to India in June 2008, that was about 6-7 months before I reached Damascus. That gave a fresh impetus to economic and commercial interaction between the two countries, because he went back convinced. In fact, before that, we had the Deputy Prime Minister of Syria here. That was a little before the presidential visit. I think both of them went back convinced that India can be a reliable and suitable economic and commercial partner for Syria. So a whole lot of projects were on the anvil by the time I reached Syria. President's visit is important for the reason that as I mentioned, it's a return goodwill visit, and apart from substantive political dialogue during such visits, a whole lot of economic initiatives also were taken. On the substantive political side, of course, we reiterated, that is, India reiterated traditional support for all just Arab causes, notably the Palestinian cause, and the return of Golan Heights to Syria. On the economic side, I think there were some important developments. One is the establishment of the India-Syria Business Forum. It was there earlier, but somehow it had fallen into disuse. But after Syria realized the importance of India as an economic partner, they wanted to revive it, and we agreed to it. This was formally inaugurated during the visit of the president. FICCI signed an MOU with Federation of Syrian Chamber of Commerce, and CII, which is also part of the presidential delegation, signed a MOU with the Federation of Syrian Chamber of Industries. We also agreed to increase the ITEC slots, ITEC scholarships given to third countries from 45 to 90. MOU on cooperation in the field of media was signed, as also a cultural exchange program. On the whole, the visit went off excellently. The Syrians were happy to receive our president, rolled out the red carpet. The president also took the opportunity to visit an important scientific research institution, agricultural scientific research institution, ICARDA, which is about 35 kilometers south of Aleppo. It is an institution similar to ICRISAT that we have in Hyderabad, or near Hyderabad. That also is very useful. So it went off smoothly, it went off very well, and we're looking forward to working on the various decisions taken during the visit of our president and the earlier visits of Syrian dignitaries to India, and also the visit of Anand Sharmaji for the Joint Commission meeting.
What were the what were the kind of economic relations that India and Syria enjoyed? And what were the main projects that the two countries were working on together?
Commercial ties were, I would say, not much, well below potential. For example, the bilateral trade would have been around $400 million. Of that, 97% would be exports from India and 3% exports from Syria. Syrian commercial establishment was not interested in looking at India as a possible destination for their products. So this we factored in and identified one item which could make a big difference to Syrian exports to India. And of course, there was another item which didn't materialize, which is olive oil. The first one is phosphates. Syria has enormous phosphate reserves. They were exploiting it, but we agreed to examine, commission a feasibility study to on augmentation of phosphate production. This project was given to PDIL, RITES, and Mekong. We had investments in the oil sector. OVL, ONGC Videsh Limited, had 18.5% stake in Al Furat Petroleum Company, the largest petroleum company in Syria in the province of Deir ez-Zor. This stake was bought from Petro-Canada, and an equal share was picked up by a Chinese company. ONGC Videsh Limited also had exploration rights in Block 24, again in the same area, same region, where in 2-3 wells they struck oil when I was there. Then feasibility of exploiting these oil resources was being studied when, of course, the unrest started and that had to be given up. Then we had a major project, that is Pishreen Power Plant Expansion Project, was awarded to BHEL, the Indian company BHEL. This was after the visit of the president of Syria. It's a 400 megawatt project. Cost is about 300 million euros, and we were financing it partially through line of credit of $240 million. Again, work had started on the project, but had to be stopped halfway through. We had another project, modernization of steel rolling mill in Hama by Apollo International, an Indian company. which again was financed partially through LOC of $25 million. The project had to be abandoned halfway through because it was we were in an embarrassing situation. It was modernization of the existing one. We had pulled down the earlier plant, and we were to start commissioning. I mean, installing the other one. In between, this thing started. Now, with the result of the Syrians lost whatever production was there, and no production was coming up. But I must give full credit to Apollo International. They tried the level best to do it. Even the Syrians threw up their hands. That's when they left. And later, after I think 4 or 5 years, they went back despite the difficult security situation. They went ahead and completed the project. They ran it for them, trained them in operation of the plant, and handed it back to them. This is about 3 years back or so. Plant is running very well from what I see in the media, and producing about 400,000 tons of steel, which is very, very critical now for them. And they are under sanctions from abroad, and when they're in the process of reconstructing the economy. So that's coming in very handy. I think one should give full credit to Apollo International for that. There's one more project I would like to mention, which is the India-Syria Center for Excellence in IT. This was set up in Damascus. Again, a decision had been taken 2 years before that. CDAC came forward to implement the project. We had set up all the facilities, started the classes. It was inaugurated by the Syrian Prime Minister Najib Otri in December 2010. Again, this also had to be stopped after the unrest broke out, but I believe it is being expanded, and some classes have started recently. These are the major projects that we had in Syria.
Was there any Indian community there in Syria? And what was the kind of cultural, religious ties between the two countries?
Indian community was very, very small. Indian community there. I think primarily it consisted of two large segments. One is the UN Disengagement Observer, UNDOF contingent from India, which is about 200 people or so. They're mostly resident on the Syrian side, but later, after the trouble started, they moved over to the Israeli side. The second is about 600 religious scholars, mostly Shias, who were there on the outskirts of Damascus in Saiz Janab area. These were religious students, teachers, etc. Apart from that, we had a small group of Baha'is, about 40 to 50 at any point of time, who were also resident in the same area. These were the sort of religious, this is the kind of religious people we had in Syria. If you leave these aside, the rest of us, rest of the Indian citizens would number barely about 200. Some in pockets in Aleppo, primarily jewelers, goldsmiths. Then we had some glass factory workers in homes, brought by an Indian who was managing the show there. Then a few experts here and there, but totally, I think in all, we would have had more than 1,000 at any point of time. About cultural interaction, yes. We have had the cultural exchange program since 1975 or so. Whatever was agreed upon was implemented from both sides. We used to receive cultural troops from the Indian side at least once, and sometimes two a year. Apart from Damascus, they used to visit other cities like Aleppo, Homs, and Latakia also. I would like to mention here that in Syria, movies are not that popular. But whenever they screen Indian movies, there are in a huge city like Damascus, they had only 4 or 5 movie halls when I was there. I don't know what the situation was before that. Whenever an Indian movie is screened, they used to get full houses. Indian actors were very popular, and they used to have annual, event, some, film event in which film personalities used to participate. And every time they will invite some Indian actor, leading actor, to come and participate, and they used to, give some award to that person. So when I was there, Sharmila Tagore had come, and it's Indian movies are quite popular there.
Let us now come to midway through your stay there. And I don't think we have this event is focused on discussing what happened in Syria from that date, but more importantly, how do you see Indian approach to the evolving situation there, especially because India was then also a member of the United Nations Security Council as a non-permanent member.
Yes, before that, just let me add one more bit to the trade and commercial ties, which is that during the Joint Commission meeting held in June 2010, the two countries set a target of doubling bilateral trade in 2-3 years, which is quite possible given the low level of trade between the two countries at that time, and also because we had identified one major item like phosphate as having potential for trade between the two countries. Now, coming to the situation after March 18, 2011, the entire focus of the embassy changed, and we were also members of, member of the UN Security Council, non-permanent member from January that year. So with the result that we were frequently interacting with the Syrian government to understand what was happening, what the situation is, what they're doing, etc., to keep the Indian mission informed and also the Indian government informed. The important thing was, of course, we had to take care of the interests of the Indian nationals there, which was not very difficult because we were in regular touch with all of them. And whenever they had some problem, we used to approach the Syrian government, who were quite helpful in sorting out these issues. So to that, it was okay to that extent. The second is the ongoing ongoing economic projects, where we had to keep an eye on what was happening in the by way of security situation in the project area. BHEL project was on the outskirts of Damascus, and unfortunately, one of the villages, the place where the project was being carried out was okay, but on the way, there was a village which has been taken over by the rebels, because of which it was difficult to go through that village. So at that stage, BHEL threw up his hands, quite rightly so, and decided to return to India. So this sort of problems were there. And yes, we were members of the, we were, as a member of UN Security Council, we tried to do whatever is possible to get the members to agree on something, because some countries tabled a resolution or circulated a resolution criticizing it as a one-sided resolution, criticizing the Syrian government, etc., etc. Whereas that was not acceptable to Russia and China. And incidentally, even the IPSA countries, that is India, Brazil, and South Africa, also conveyed that we won't be able to support the resolution in that form. A couple of other members also had conveyed the same thing, because of which the resolutions were never tabled. In August, we took over the presidency of the UN Security Council. Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, presently MOS here, was the president at that time of the UN Security Council. He worked tirelessly to get something done on the Syrian issue, because it has become embarrassing for the UN as an organization that despite what is happening in Syria, they have not been able to come out with a single statement on Syria. Partially it was because the Russians and Chinese thought that the resolution on Libya had been interpreted, or rather misinterpreted by some countries to start an aerial bombardment campaign against this one and to work for regime change in Libya, which they find it difficult to stomach, because of it they didn't want to repeat what they call the mistake in Syria. So they did not agree to any loosely worded statement on Syria. So Hardeep finally succeeded in getting the UNSC members to agree on a presidential statement. Okay, this also, with great difficulty he managed. It was finally issued on the 3rd of August that year. The main points were, of course, it condemned the widespread violations of human rights and use of force against civilians by the Syrian government. It called for an immediate end to all violence and urged all sides to act with utmost restraint and to refrain from reprisals, including attacks against the state institutions. It called on Syrian authorities to fully respect human rights and to comply with their obligations under relevant applicable international law, and also said that those responsible for the violence should be held accountable. It assured, rather, it reaffirmed its strong commitment to the sovereignty and independence, as also territorial integrity of Syria. And importantly, it stressed that the only solution is through an inclusive and Syrian-led political process with the aim of effectively addressing the legitimate aspirations and concerns of the Syrian population. Now, this last point is what is being repeated in the subsequent UN statements, including the major resolution of December 2015. This is one aspect. Apart from that, we had a delegation of IPSA senior officials visiting Syria. This was in August 2011. From India, Mr. Dilip Sinha, Additional Secretary, International Organizations, participated was a member of the delegation. It was organized at a short notice. Despite that, we were able to manage to meet the foreign minister and the president of Syria. The president, reassured the delegation of his commitment to the reform process aimed at ushering in multi-party democracy, including through revision of the constitution. He acknowledged that some mistakes had been made by the security forces in the initial stages of the unrest, and that efforts were underway to prevent the recurrence. He assured that the process of revision of the constitution would be completed by February-March 2012. Now, this was the assurance given in August. Basically, he wanted 6 more months to do. In fact, the same thing was repeated by Walid Muallim, the foreign minister. Of course, after that, things got out of hand, and even the process of consultations that the government had with the opposition could not be held because the opposition refused to come for dialogue with the government. Now, this is in essence what happened during the visit of IPSA delegation.
A question that arises immediately is that when the IPSA delegation came, what level did they meet people in Syria, and what were the kind of interactions we maintained in Syria during this period? At what level?
IPSA delegation, as I mentioned earlier, the main meetings were with the foreign minister and with the president. And they also met, I think, the current foreign minister, MOS, who was at that time MOS in Syria. They did not meet any outsiders. In fact, there was at that time there was no major problem in Damascus. But as far as the embassy is concerned, we went out of the way to be in touch with almost everybody. Every section of public opinion, including those opposed to the government. In fact, I do recall I went and met the person projected by some of the opponents as a possible leader of the opposition. But the basic point in Syria is there was no proper opposition because the political system was so designed that no other political party could survive or thrive under such situations. Everything was controlled by Baath Party. Of course, there were a few parties aligned with Baath Party which were allowed to function, but otherwise, there was no political party worth the name. I recall distinctly that when somebody said, "Oh, this is a major party, you should be in touch with them," etc., I asked him what will be the level of support, and I was astonished to hear him saying that they will, if they contest, then they will get about 6,000 votes. Now, what is 6,000 votes in a population of 24 million? Okay, out of which at least say 14, 15 million will be voters. But anyway, I'm not blaming the opposition or anybody else. It is just that the political system was such that it was not conducive to the functioning of any effective opposition party. But we went out of the way to meet everybody. In fact, sometimes it became embarrassing, and like we go and meet somebody without knowing the full background, and that chap accidentally comes across this and the regional leader of doing this anti-government activities, etc. I mean, one had one had to be careful in dealing with them. Yes, we met opposition, and we kept Delhi informed that we were meeting the opposition. And to be fair to the Syrian government, they never objected to any of these meetings. Even though we were a little embarrassed on a couple of occasions, they never had any difficulty with that. I recall a particular incident when I had gone to Latakia in late June, early July 2011. I met a religious person, I mean, the mullah, this one, even when I was sitting with him having tea in a restaurant, it was organized by his brother, whom I knew very well. But he did not tell me about the background of this one. He said, you can meet my brother. He's well clued up about what's happening. So I did. Even when I was having tea with him, one of the many Arab language channels is saying that he's leading a demonstration in front of a mosque, and that massive crowd has gathered there, etc., etc. So I got an urgent call from my colleague in the mission saying that, sir, you were to meet this person, please avoid. I asked him why. He said, this is what is being reported. I said, okay, forget it, I'll tell you later. Then I asked him what happened. This is what the media is reporting. He said, yes, he had planned something, but he cancelled it because today something else is going to happen in Aleppo. Now, this sort of a thing used to go on, but I had a very useful meeting with him. And I could, basically the opposition was not very clear on what they wanted. They didn't have, you asked them for anything specific, any specific grounds they had. Yes, lack of democracy is there. But in terms of practical manifestation of that, they were not able to come out and identify, X, Y, or Z. They wanted change, but they don't know what change they wanted. They didn't know how to go about it. Again, it's all because for the previous 30, 40 years, there was no democracy in that country. So they didn't know, how to go about organizing it. And by that time, they had also seen what was happening in Libya. So they started getting a little wary. Then they also saw the activities of some of the extremist elements that had sneaked into Syria, which also alerted them, which also made them afraid of what change are we getting ourselves into. I again recall some of the youngsters who were, pro-government when the agitation started. Within a month, they changed sides. They were very, very vocal anti-government supporters. And 6-8 months later, those people returned quietly back to the government side. So somebody asked them why, and they said, we see what's happening on the other side. We don't want our country to be reduced to that state. We just want peace. We have no problem in living with the government. I mean, this is what happened there. But anyway, we kept in touch with all sections of public opinion, irrespective of whether they are supportive of government or not.
So you were moving around Syria during this period till end of December, till December 2012. There was no real problem, was there?
There was no problem. I had gone to Aleppo, I had gone to Latakia, I had gone eastwards also, then to Palmyra area, to Sweda area, to Bosra. I had been moving around. There was no restriction imposed by the government. Though sometimes they used to say, be careful, maybe avoid Friday or some such thing, but it was an advice. They didn't say you can't go. In fact, I remember when I went to Latakia, it was not even, I told the Foreign Office because we are required to inform them, even in normal times. We had a person with Latakia. At that time, there was an official dinner. I was sitting next to him. He's an official from Foreign Office. He's from Latakia. He said, I was to go immediately after the lunch. Ambassador, please don't go. I mean, maybe you can go travel tomorrow or something. I said, doesn't matter. I'll go because I've already told people I'll meet them there. So I can't back off at this time. So I went there, and you won't believe there was absolutely nothing from all the way from Damascus to Latakia, a distance of maybe about 270, 280 kilometers. I didn't see a single armed policeman, single single disturbance on the road, nothing of that sort. I went there only at the entrance to Latakia. There was a pickup truck with 4 or 5 people with guns standing there to probably check any miscreants trying to enter. But other than that, there was no problem. And I moved around freely.